The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Volume 1, Cosmogenesis. Part 1, Cosmic Evolution, 7 stanzas translated with commentaries from the Secret Book of John. Stanza 6. 1. By the power of the Mother of Mercy and Knowledge, Kuan Yin, the triple of Kuan Sha Yin, residing in Kuan Yin Tian, forehead, the breath of their progeny, the son of the sons, having called forth from the lower abyss the elusive form of Xian Chang and the 7 elements. Note: verse 1 of stanza 6 is of a far later date than the other stanzas, though still very ancient. The old text of this verse, having names entirely unknown to the Orientalists, would give no clue to the students. End of note. 2. The swift and radiant one produces the 7 Laya centers, against which none will prevail till the great day be with us, and seats the universe on these eternal foundations surrounding Tian Chang with elementary germs. 3. Of the 7, first 1 manifested, 6 concealed, 2 manifested, 5 concealed, 3 manifested, 4 concealed, 4 produced, 3 hidden, 4 and 1 Chan revealed, 2 and 1/2 concealed, 6 to be manifested, 1 laid aside. Lastly, 7 small wheels revolving, 1 giving birth to the other. 4. He built them in the likeness of older wheels, placing them on the imperishable centers. How does Fohat build them? He collects the fiery dust. He makes balls of fire, runs through them and round them, infusing life therein too, then sets them into motion, some one way, some the other way. They are cold, and he makes them hot. They are dry, and he makes them moist. They shine, he fans and cools them. Thus acts Fohat from one twilight to the other during 7 eternities. 5. At the 4th, the sons are told to create their images. 1/3 refuses to obey. The curse is pronounced. They will be born on the 4th, suffer and cause suffering. This is the first war. 6. The older wheels rotated downwards and upwards. The mother spawn filled the whole. There were battles fought between the creators and the destroyers, and battles fought for space, the seed appearing and reappearing continuously. 7. Make thy calculations, Lanu, if thou wouldest learn the correct age of thy small wheel. Its 4th spoke is our mother. Reach the 4th fruit of the 4th path of knowledge that leads to nirvana, and thou shalt comprehend, for thou shalt see. Commentary. Stanza 6. 1. By the power of the Mother of Mercy and Knowledge. The Mother of Mercy and Knowledge is called the triple of Kuan Sha Yin, because in her correlations, metaphysical and cosmical, she is the mother, the wife, and the daughter of the Logos. Just as in the later theological translations she became the Father, Son, and the female Holy Ghost, the Shakti or energy, the essence of the 3. Thus in the esotericism of the Vedantins, Daiva Prakriti, the light manifested through Eshvara, the Logos, is at one and the same time the mother and also the daughter of the Logos, or Verbum, of Parabrahman, while in that of the Trans-Himalayan teachings it is, in the hierarchy of allegorical and metaphysical theogony, the mother or abstract ideal matter, Mula Prakriti, the root of nature. From the metaphysical standpoint, a correlation of Adibhuta, manifested in the Logos, Avalokiteshvara, and from the purely occult and cosmical, Fohat, the son of the sun, the androgynous energy resulting from this light of the Logos, and which manifests in the plane of the objective universe as the hidden, as much as the revealed electricity, which is life. Notes. Note on Daivi Prakriti, the Logos. The Theosophist of February 1887, page 305, first lecture on the Bhagavad Gita. End of note. Note on forehead. Says the lecturer on page 306. Evolution is commenced by the intellectual energy of the Logos, not merely on account of the potentialities locked up in Mula Prakriti. This light of the Logos is the link between objective matter and the subjective thought of Eshvara or Logos. It is called in several Buddhist books forehead. It is the one instrument with which the Logos works. End of note. Kuan Yin, the triple of Kuan Sha Yin, residing in Kuan Yin Tian. Note. This stanza is translated from the Chinese text, and the names and the equivalents of the original terms are preserved. The real esoteric nomenclature cannot be given, as it would only confuse the reader. The Brahmanical doctrine has no equivalent to these. Vach seems, in many an aspect, to approach the Chinese Kuan Yin, but there is no regular worship of Vach under this name in India, as there is of Kuan Yin in China. No exoteric religious system has ever adopted a female creator, and thus woman was regarded and treated from the first dawn of popular religions as inferior to man. It is only in China and Egypt that Kuan Yin and Isis were placed on a par with the male gods. Esotericism ignores both sexes. Its highest deity is sexless, as it is formless, neither father nor mother, and its first manifested beings, celestial and terrestrial alike, become only gradually androgynous and finally separate into distinct sexes. End of note. Kuan Yin Tian means the melodious heaven of sound, the abode of Kuan Yin, or the divine voice, literally. This voice is a synonym of the verbum, or the word, speech as the expression of thought. Thus may be traced the connection with and even the origin of the Hebrew Bath Kol, the daughter of the divine voice, or verbum, or the male and female Logos, the heavenly man, or Adam Kadmon, who is at the same time Sephira. The latter was surely anticipated by the Hindu Vach, the goddess of speech, or of the word. For Vach, the daughter and the female portion, as is stated of Brahma, one generated by the gods, is, in company with Kuan Yin, with Isis, also the daughter, wife and sister of Osiris and other goddesses, the female Logos, so to speak, the goddess of the active forces in nature, the word, voice or sound and speech. If Kuan Yin is the melodious voice, so is Vach, the melodious cow who milked forth sustenance and water, the female principle, who yields us nourishment and sustenance as Mother Nature. She is associated in the work of creation with the Prajapati. She is male and female ad libitum, as Eve is with Adam. And she is a form of Aditi, the principle higher than ether in Akasha, the synthesis of all the forces of nature. Thus Vach and Kuan Yin are both the magic potency of occult sound in nature and ether, which voice calls forth Xian Chan, the elusive form of the universe out of chaos and the seven elements. Thus in Manu Brahma, the Logos also is showing dividing his body into two parts, male and female, and creating in the latter, who is Vach, Viraj, who is himself, or Brahma again. It is in this way a learned Vedantin occultist speaks of that, quote, goddess, unquote, explaining the reason why Eshvara, or Brahma, is called verbum or logos, why in fact it is called Sabda Brahman. Quote, the explanation I am going to give you will appear thoroughly mystical, but if mystical, it has a tremendous significance when properly understood. Our old writers said that Vach is of four kinds, see Rig Veda and the Upanishads. Vaikari Vach is what we utter. Every kind of Vaikari Vach exists in its Madhyama, further in its Pasyanti, and ultimately in its Para form. Note, Madhya is said of something whose commencement and end are unknown, and Para means infinite. These expressions all relate to infinitude and to division of time. End of note. The reason why this pranava is called Vak is this, that the four principles of the great cosmos correspond to these four forms of Vak. Now the whole manifested solar system exists in its sukshma form, in the light or energy of the Logos, because its energy is caught up and transferred to cosmic matter. The whole cosmos in its objective form is Vaikari Vak. The light of the Logos is the Mariama form, and the Logos itself the Pasyanti form, and Parabrahm the Para form or aspect of that Vak. It is by the light of this explanation that we must try to understand certain statements made by various philosophers to the effect that the manifested cosmos is the verbum manifested as cosmos. Unquote. See a lecture on the Bhagavad Gita referred to above. Stanza 6 continued. 2. The swift and the radiant one produces the 7 layu. The 7 layu centers are the 7 0 points, using the term zero in the same sense that chemists do to indicate a point at which, in esotericism, the scale reckoning of differentiation begins. From the centers, beyond which esoteric philosophy allows us to perceive the dim metaphysical outlines of the 7 suns of life and light, the 7 logoi of the Hermetic and all the other philosophers, begins the differentiation of the elements which enter into the constitution of our solar system. It has often been asked, what was the exact definition of Fohat and his powers and functions, as he seems to exercise those of a personal god as understood in the popular religions? The answer has just been given in the comment on stanza 5. As well said in the Bhagavad Gita lectures, the whole cosmos must necessarily exist in the one source of energy from which this light, Fohat, emanates. Whether we count the principles in cosmos and man as 7 or only as 4, the forces of and in physical nature are 7, and it is stated by the same authority that prajna, or the capacity of perception, exists in 7 different aspects corresponding to the 7 conditions of matter, personal and impersonal God. For just as a human being is composed of 7 principles, differentiated matter in the solar system exists in 7 different conditions from the same source. So does Fohat. Note, Fohat has several meanings. See stanza 5, commentary et infra. He is called the builder of the builders, the force that he personifies having formed our septenary chain. End of note. He is 1 and 7, and on the cosmic plane is behind all such manifestations as light, heat, sound, adhesion, etc., etc., and is the spirit of electricity, which is the life of the universe. As an abstraction, we call it the one life. As an objective and evident reality, we speak of a septenary scale of manifestation, which begins at the upper rung with the one unknowable causality, and ends as omnipresent mind and life immanent in every atom of matter. Thus, while science speaks of its evolution through brute matter, blind force, and senseless motion, the occultists point to the intelligent law and sentient life, and add that Fohat is the guiding spirit of all this. Yet he is no personal God at all, but the emanation of those other powers behind him whom the Christians call the messengers of their God, who is in reality only the Elohim, or rather one of the 7 creators called Elohim, and we, the messenger of the primordial sons of life and light. 7 layu centers, against which none will prevail, to the great day be with us, and seats the universe on these eternal foundations, surrounding Xian Chan with the elementary germs. The elementary germs with which he fills Xian Chan, the universe, from Tian Xin, the heaven of mind, literally, or that which is absolute, are the atoms of science and the monads of Leibniz. Stanza 6 continued. 3. Of the 7 elements, first 1 manifested, 6 concealed, 2 manifested, 5 concealed, 3 manifested, 4 concealed, 4 produced, 3 hidden, 4 and 1 Zan fraction revealed, 2 and 1 half concealed, 6 to be manifested, 1 laid aside. Although these stanzas refer to the whole universe after a Mahapralaya, universal destruction, yet this sentence, as any student of occultism may see, refers also by analogy to the evolution and final formation of the primitive, though compound, 7 elements on our earth. Of these, 4 elements are now fully manifested, while the 5th, ether, is only partially so, as we are hardly in the second half of the 4th round, and consequently the 5th element will manifest fully only in the 5th round. The worlds, including our own, were of course as germs primarily evolved from the one element in its second stage, Father Mother, the differentiated world's soul, not what is termed the oversoul by Emerson. Whether we call it, with modern science, cosmic dust and fire mist, or with occultism, Akasha, Jivatma, divine astral light, or the soul of the world. But this first stage of evolution was in due course of time followed by the next. No world, as no heavenly body, could be constructed on the objective plane had not the elements been sufficiently differentiated already from their primeval ilus, resting in Laya. The latter term is a synonym of nirvana. It is, in fact, the nirvanic dissociation of all substances merge after a life cycle into the latency of their primary conditions. It is the luminous but bodiless shadow of the matter that was, the realm of negativeness, wherein lie latent during their period of rest the active forces of the universe. Now, speaking of elements, it is made the standing reproach of the ancients that they supposed their elements simple and undecomposable. Note: the shades of our prehistorical ancestors might return the compliment to modern physicists, now that new discoveries in chemistry have led Mr. Crookes, FRS, to admit that science is yet 1,000 leagues from the knowledge of the compound nature of the simplest molecule. From him we learn that such a thing as a really simple molecule entirely homogeneous is terra incognita in chemistry. Where are we to draw the line, he asks. Is there no way out of this perplexity? Must we either make the elementary examinations so stiff that only 60 or 70 candidates can pass? Or must we open the examination doors so wide that the number of admissions is limited only by the number of applicants? And then the learned gentleman gives striking instances. He says, take the case of yttrium. It has a definite atomic weight. It behaved in every respect as a simple body, an element, to which we might indeed add, but from which we could not take away. Yet this yttrium, this supposed homogeneous whole, on being submitted to a certain method of fractionation, is resolved into portions not absolutely identical among themselves, and exhibiting a gradation of properties. Or take the case of didymium. Here was a body betraying all the recognized characters of an element. It had been separated with much difficulty from other bodies which approximated closely to it in their properties, and during this crucial process it had undergone very severe treatment and very close scrutiny. But then came another chemist who, treating this assumed homogeneous body by a peculiar process of fractionation, resolved it into the 2 bodies, praseodymium and neodymium, between which certain distinctions are perceptible. Further, we even now have no certainty that neodymium and praseodymium are simple bodies. On the contrary, they likewise exhibit symptoms of splitting up. Now, if one supposed element on proper treatment is thus found to comprise dissimilar molecules, we are surely warranted in asking whether similar results might not be obtained in other elements, perhaps in all elements, if treated in the right way. We may even ask whether the process of sorting out is to stop, a process which, of course, presupposes variations between the individual molecules of each species. And in these successive separations, we naturally find bodies approaching more and more closely to each other. Quote from Presidential Address before the Royal Society of Chemists, March 1888. End of note. Once more, this is an unwarrantable statement, as at any rate the initiated philosophers can hardly come under such an imputation, since it is they who have invented allegories and religious myths from the beginning. Had they been ignorant of the heterogeneity of their elements, they would have had no personifications of fire, air, water, earth, and aether. Their cosmic gods and goddesses would never have been blessed with such posterity, with so many sons and daughters, elements born from and within each respective element. Alchemy and occult phenomena would have been a delusion and a snare, even in theory, had the ancients been ignorant of the potentialities and correlative functions and attributes of every element that enters into the composition of air, water, earth, and even fire. The latter a terra incognita to this day to modern science, which is obliged to call it motion, evolution of light and heat, state of ignition, defining it by its outward aspects, in short, and remaining ignorant of its nature. But that which modern science seems to fail to perceive is that, differentiated as may have been those simple chemical atoms, which archaic philosophy called the creators of their respective parents, fathers, brothers, husbands of their mothers, and those mothers the daughters of their own sons, like Aditya and Daksha, for example, differentiated as these elements were in the beginning. Still, they were not the compound bodies known to science as they are now. Neither water, air, earth, synonyms for solids generally, existed in their present form, representing the three states of matter alone recognized by science. For all these are the productions already recombined by the atmospheres of globes completely formed, even to fire, so that in the first periods of the earth's formation they were something quite sui generis. Now that the conditions and laws ruling our solar system are fully developed, and that the atmosphere of our Earth, as of every other globe, has become, so to say, a crucible of its own, occult science teaches that there is a perpetual exchange taking place in space of molecules, or of atoms rather, correlating and thus changing the combining equivalents on every planet. Some men of science, and those among the greatest physicists and chemists, begin to suspect this fact, which has been known for ages to the occultists. The spectroscope only shows the probable similarity, on external evidence, of terrestrial and sidereal substance. It is unable to go any farther, or to show whether atoms gravitate towards one another in the same way and under the same conditions as they are supposed to do on our planet, physically and chemically. The scale of temperature, from the highest degree to the lowest that can be conceived of, may be imagined to be one and the same in and for the whole universe. Nevertheless, its properties, other than those of dissociation and reassociation, differ on every planet, and thus atoms enter into new forms of existence, undreamt of and incognizable to physical science. As already expressed in 5 years of theosophy, the essence of cometary matter, for instance, is totally different from any of the chemical or physical characteristics with which the greatest chemists and physicists of the earth are acquainted. See page 242. And even that matter, during rapid passage through our atmosphere, undergoes a certain change in its nature, thus not alone the elements of our planets, but even those of all its sisters in the solar system, differ as widely from each other in their combinations as from the cosmic elements beyond our solar limits. Note: this is again corroborated by the same man of science in the same lecture, who quotes Clerk Maxwell saying that the elements are not absolutely homogeneous. He writes, "It is difficult to conceive of selection and elimination of intermediate varieties, for where can these eliminated molecules have gone to if, as we have reason to believe, the hydrogen, etc., of the fixed stars is composed of molecules identical in all respects with our own?" And he adds, "In the first place, we may call in question this absolute molecular identity, since we have hitherto had no means for coming to a conclusion save the means furnished by the spectroscope, while it is admitted that for accurately comparing and discriminating the spectra of two bodies, that they should be examined under identical states of temperature, pressure, and all other physical conditions. We have certainly seen in the spectrum of the sun rays which we have not been able to identify. End of note. Therefore, they cannot be taken as a standard for comparison with the same in other worlds. Note. Quote, each world has its Fohat, who is omnipresent in his own sphere of action. But there are as many Fohats as there are worlds, each varying in power and degree of manifestations. The individual Fohats make one universal collective Fohat, the aspect entity of the one absolute non-entity, which is absolute beingness, Sat. Millions and billions of worlds are produced at every Manvantara, it is said. Therefore, there must be many Fohats, whom we consider as conscious and intelligent forces. This, no doubt, to the disgust of scientific minds. Nevertheless, the occultists, who have good reasons for it, consider all the forces of nature as veritable, though supersensuous, states of matter, and as possible objects of perception to beings endowed with the requisite senses. End of note. Enshrined in their virgin, pristine state within the bosom of the Eternal Mother, every atom born beyond the threshold of her realm is doomed to incessant differentiation. The Mother sleeps, yet is ever breathing, and every breath sends out into the plane of manifestation her protean products, which, carried on by the wave of the efflux, are scattered by Fohat and driven toward and beyond this or another planetary atmosphere. Once caught by the latter, the atom is lost. Its pristine purity is gone forever unless fate dissociates it by leading it to a current of efflux, an occult term meaning quite a different process from that which the ordinary term implies, when it may be carried once more to the borderland where it had perished, and taken its flight, not into space above, but into space within, it will be brought under a state of a differential equilibrium and happily reabsorbed. Were a truly learned occultist alchemist to write the life and adventures of an atom, he would secure thereby the eternal scorn of the modern chemist, perchance also his subsequent gratitude. Note. Indeed, if such an imaginary chemist happened to be intuitional, and would for a moment step out of the habitual groove of strictly, quote, exact science, unquote, as the alchemists of old did, he might be repaid for his audacity. End of note. However it may be, the breath of the Father-Mother issues cold and radiant and gets hot and corrupt to cool once more, and be purified in the eternal bosom of inner space, says the commentary. Man absorbs cold, pure air on the mountaintop, and throws it out impure, hot, and transformed. Thus, the high atmosphere being the mouth, and the lower one the lungs of every globe, the man of our planet breathes only the refuse of, quote, mother, unquote. Therefore, quote, he is doomed to die on it, unquote. And note, he who would allotropize sluggish oxygen into ozone to a measure of alchemical activity, reducing it to its pure essence, for which there are means, would discover thereby a substitute for an elixir of life and prepare it for practical use. End of note. Lastly, 7 small wheels revolving, one giving birth to the other. The process referred to as the small wheels giving birth, one to the other, takes place in the 6th region from above, and on the plane of the most material world of all in the manifested cosmos, our terrestrial plane. These 7 wheels are our planetary chain. See Commentary 5 and 6. By wheels, the various spheres and centers of forces are generally meant, but in this case they refer to our septenary ring. Stanza 6 continued. 4. who builds them in the likeness of older worlds, placing them on the imperishable centers. The worlds are built in the likeness of older wheels, that is, those that existed in preceding Manvantaras and went into Pralaya, because the law for the birth, growth, and decay of everything in cosmos, from the sun to the glowworm in the grass, is one. It is an everlasting work of perfection with every new appearance, but the substance, matter, and forces are all one and the same. But this law acts on every planet through minor and varying laws. The imperishable Laya centers have a great importance, and their meaning must be fully understood if we would have a clear conception of the archaic cosmogony, whose theories have now passed into occultism. At present, one thing may be stated. The worlds are built neither upon, nor over, nor in the Laya centers, the 0 point being a condition, not any mathematical point. How does Fohat build them? He collects the fiery dust, he makes balls of fire, runs through them and round them, infusing life therein too, then sets them into motion, some one, some the other way. They are cold, he makes them hot. They are dry, he makes them moist. They shine, he fans and cools them. Bear in mind that Fohat, the constructive force of cosmic electricity, is said, metaphorically, to have sprung like Rudra from Brahma, from the brain of the father and the bosom of the mother, and then to have metamorphosed himself into a male and a female, that is, polarity, into positive and negative electricity. He has 7 sons who are his brothers, and Fohat is thought to be born time after time whenever any 2 of his son brothers indulge in too close contact, whether an embrace or a fight. To avoid this, he binds together and unites those of unlike nature and separates those of similar temperaments. This, of course, relates, as anyone can see, to electricity generated by friction and to the law involving attraction between 2 objects of unlike and repulsion between those of like polarity. The 7 sons brothers, however, represent and personify the 7 forms of cosmic magnetism, called in practical occultism the 7 radicals, whose cooperative and active progeny are, among other energies, electricity, magnetism, sound, light, heat, cohesion, etc. Occult science defines all these as supersenses effects in their hidden behavior, and as objective phenomena in the world of senses, the former requiring abnormal faculties to perceive them, the latter our ordinary physical senses. They all pertain to and are the emanation of still more supersensive spiritual qualities not personated by, but belonging to, real and conscious causes. To attempt a description of such entities would be worse than useless. The reader must bear in mind that, according to our teaching, which regards this phenomenal universe as a great illusion, the nearer a body is to the unknown substance, the more it approaches reality, as being removed the farther from this world of Maya. Therefore, though the molecular constitution of their bodies is not deducible from their manifestations on this plane of consciousness, they nevertheless, from the standpoint of the adept occultist, possess a distinctive objective, if not material structure, in the relatively noumenal, as opposed to the phenomenal universe. Men of science may term the force or forces generated by matter, or modes of its motion, if they will. Occultism sees in the effects elemental forces, and in the direct causes producing them, intelligent divine workmen. The intimate connection of those elementals, guided by the unerring hand of the rulers, their correlation, we might call it, with the elements of pure matter, results in our terrestrial phenomena, such as light, heat, magnetism, etc., etc. Of course, we shall never agree with the American substantialists, who call every force and energy with the light, heat, electricity, or cohesion an entity, for this would be equivalent to calling the noise produced by the rolling of the wheels of a vehicle an entity, thus confusing and identifying that noise with the driver outside and the guiding master intelligence within the vehicle. But we certainly give that name to the drivers and to these guiding intelligences, the ruling Dyan-Quochans, as shown. The elementals, the nature forces, are the acting, though invisible or rather imperceptible, secondary causes, and in themselves the effects of primary causes behind the veil of all terrestrial phenomena. Electricity, light, heat, etc., have been aptly termed the ghost or shadow of matter in motion, that is, supersensitive states of matter whose effects only we are able to cognize. To expand then the simile given above. The sensation of light is like the sound of the rolling wheels, a purely phenomenal effect, having no existence outside the observer. The proximate exciting cause of the sensation is comparable to the driver, a supersensitive state of matter in motion, a nature force or elemental. But behind even this stand, just as the owner of the carriage directs the driver from within, the higher noumenal causes, the intelligences from whose essence radiate these states of mother, generating the countless milliards of elementals or psychic nature spirits, just as every drop of water generates its physical infinitesimal infusoria. See God's monads and atoms in Part 3. It is Fohat who guides the transfer of the principles from one planet to the other, from one star to another, child star. When a planet dies, its informing principles are transferred to a laya, or sleeping center, with potential but latent energy in it, which is thus awakened into life and begins to form itself into the new sidereal body. Vide infra, a few theosophical misconceptions, etc. It is most remarkable that, while honestly confessing their entire ignorance of the true nature of even terrestrial matter, primordial substance being regarded more as a dream than as a sober reality, the physicists should set themselves up as judges nevertheless of that matter, and claim to know what it is able and is not able to do in various combinations. Scientists know it, matter, hardly skin deep, and yet they will dogmatize. It is a mode of motion, and nothing else, but the force that is inherent in a living person's breath, when blowing a speck of dust from the table, is also, and undeniably, a mode of motion, and it is as undeniably not a quality of the matter or the particles of that speck, and it emanates from the living and thinking entity that breathed, whether the impulse originated consciously or unconsciously. Indeed, to endow matter, something of which nothing is known so far, with an inherent quality called force, of the nature of which still less is known, is to create a far more serious difficulty than that which lies in the acceptation of the intervention of our nature spirits in every natural phenomenon. The occultists who do not say, if they would express themselves correctly, that matter, but only the substance or essence of matter, is indestructible and eternal, that is, the root of all, mula prakriti, assert that all the so-called forces of nature, electricity, magnetism, light, heat, etc., etc., far from being modes of motion or material particles, are in esse, that is, in their ultimate constitution, the differentiated aspects of that universal motion, which is discussed and explained in the first pages of this volume. See Proem. When Fohat is said to produce 7 laya centers, it means that for formative or creative purposes, the great law, theists may call it God, stops, or rather modifies its perpetual motion on 7 invisible points within the area of the manifested universe. From the occult catechism, the great breath digs through space 7 holes into laya to cause them to circumgyrate during Manvantara. We have said that laya is what science may call the 0 point or line, the realm of absolute negativeness, or the one real absolute force, the noumenon of the 7th state of that which we ignorantly call and recognize as force, or again the noumenon of undifferentiated cosmic substance, which is itself an unreachable and unknowable object to finite perception, the root and basis of all states of objectivity and subjectivity too, the natural axis, not one of the many aspects, but its center, It may serve to elucidate the meaning if we attempt to imagine a neutral center, the dream of those who would discover perpetual motion. A neutral center is, in one aspect, the limiting point of any given set of senses. Thus, imagine two consecutive planes of matter as already formed, each of these corresponding to an appropriate set of perceptive organs. We are forced to admit that between these two planes of matter an incessant circulation takes place, and if we follow the atoms and molecules of, say, the lower in their transformation upwards, these will come to a point where they pass altogether beyond the range of the faculties we are using on the lower plane. In fact, to us the matter of the lower plane there vanishes from our perception into nothing, or rather it passes on to the higher plane, and the state of matter corresponding to such a point of transition must certainly possess special and not readily discoverable properties. Such 7 neutral centers, then, are produced by Fohat, who, when, as Milton has it, fair foundations are laid whereon to build, quickens matter into activity and evolution. Note on 7 neutral centers. Such, we believe, is the name applied by Mr. Keeley of Philadelphia, the inventor of the infamous motor, destined, as his admirers have hoped, to revolutionize the motor power of the world, to what he again calls the etheric centers. End of note. The primordial atom, Anu, cannot be multiplied either in its pregenetic state or its primogeneity. Therefore it is called sum total, figuratively of course, as that sum total is boundless. See addendum to this book. That which is the abyss of nothingness to the physicist, who knows only of the world of visible causes and effects, is the boundless space of the divine plenum to the occultist. Among many other objections to the doctrine of an endless evolution and re-involution or reabsorption of the cosmos, a process which, according to the Brahminical and esoteric doctrine, is without a beginning or an end, the occultist is told that it cannot be, since, by all the admissions of modern scientific philosophy, it is a necessity of nature to run down. If the tendency of nature to run down is to be considered so forcible an objection to occult cosmogony, how, we may ask, do your positivists and freethinkers and scientists account for the phalanx around us of active stellar systems? They had eternity to run down in. Why then is not the cosmos a huge inert mass? Even the moon is only hypothetically believed to be a dead planet. Run down. And astronomy does not seem to be acquainted with many such dead planets. Note: the moon is dead only so far as regards her inner principles, that is, psychically and spiritually, however absurd the statement may seem. Physically, she is only as a semi-paralyzed body may be. She is aptly referred to in occultism as the insane mother, the great sidereal lunatic. End of note. The query is unanswerable, but apart from this, it must be noted that the idea of the amount of transformable energy in our little system coming to an end is based purely on the fallacious conception of a white-hot, incandescent sun perpetually radiating away his heat without compensation into space. To this we reply that nature runs down and disappears from the objective plane only to re-emerge after a time of rest, out of the subjective, and to reascend once more. Our cosmos and nature will run down only to reappear on a more perfect plane after every pralaya. The matter of the Eastern philosophers is not the matter and nature of the Western metaphysicians. For what is matter? And above all, what is our scientific philosophy but that which was so justly and so politely defined by Kant as the science of the limits to our knowledge? Where have the many attempts made by science to bind, to connect, and define all the phenomena of organic life by mere physical and chemical manifestations brought it to? To speculation generally, mere soap bubbles that burst one after the other before the men of science were permitted to discover real facts. And all this would have been avoided, and the progress of knowledge would have proceeded with gigantic strides, had only science and its philosophy abstained from accepting hypotheses on the mere one-sided knowledge of their matter. Note: the instance of Uranus and Neptune, whose satellites, 4 and 1 respectively, revolved, it was thought, in their orbits from east to west, whereas all the other satellites rotate from west to east, is a very good one, as showing how unreliable are all a priori speculations even when based on the strictest mathematical analysis. The famous hypothesis of the formation of our solar system out of the nebulous rings, put forward by Kant and Laplace, was chiefly based on the above fact that all the planets revolved in the same direction. It is on this fact, mathematically demonstrated during the time of Laplace, that this great astronomer, calculating on the theory of probabilities, offered to bet 3 milliards to 1 that the next planet discovered would have in its system the same peculiarity of motion eastward. The immutable laws of scientific mathematics got worsted by further experiments and observations, it was said. This idea of Laplace's mistake prevails generally to this day, but some astronomers have finally succeeded in demonstrating that the mistake had been in accepting Laplace's assertion for a mistake, and steps to correct it without attracting general attention to the bévue are now being taken. Many such unpleasant surprises are in store for hypotheses of even a purely physical character. What further disillusions, then, may there not be in questions for transcendental occult nature? At any rate, occultism teaches that the so-called reverse rotation is a fact. End of note. If no physical intellect is capable of counting the grains of sand covering a few miles of seashore, or to fathom the ultimate nature and essence of those grains, palpable and visible on the palm of the naturalist, how can any materialist limit the laws changing the conditions and being of the atoms in primordial chaos, or know anything certain about the capabilities and potency of the atoms and molecules before and after their formation into worlds? These changeless and eternal molecules, far thicker in space than the grains on the ocean shore, may differ in their constitution along the line of their planes of existence, as the soul substance differs from its vehicle, the body. Each atom has 7 planes of being or existence, we are taught, and each plane is governed by its specific laws of evolution and absorption. Ignorant of any, even approximate, chronological data from which to start in attempting to decide the age of our planet or the origin of the solar system, astronomers, geologists, and physicists are drifting with each new hypothesis farther and farther away from the shores of fact into the fathomless depths of speculative ontology. Note: the occultists, having most perfect faith in their own exact records, astronomical and mathematical, calculate the age of humanity and assert that the latter, as separate sexes, has existed in this round just 11,618,727 years, as the Brahmanical teachings and even some Hindu calendars declare. End of note. The law of analogy in the plan of structure between the trans-solar systems and the intrasolar planets does not necessarily bear upon the finite conditions to which every visible body is subject in this our plane of being. In occult science, this law is the first and most important key to cosmic physics. But it has to be studied in its minutest details and to be turned 7 times before one comes to understand it. Occult philosophy is the only science that can teach it. How then can anyone hang the truth or the untruth of the occultist proposition that the cosmos is eternal in its unconditioned collectivity and finite but in its conditioned manifestations, on this one-sided physical enunciation that it is a necessity of nature to run down? With these verses, the 4th sloka of stanza 6 ends that portion of the stanzas which relate to the universal cosmogony after the last Mahapralaya, or universal destruction, which, when it comes, sweeps out of space every differentiated thing, gods and atoms, like so many dry leaves. From this verse onwards, the stanzas are concerned only with our solar system in general, with the planetary chains therein inferentially, and with the history of our globe, the fourth and its chain especially. All the stanzas and verses which follow in this Book 1 refer only to the evolution of and on our Earth. With regard to the latter, a strange tenet, strange from the modern scientific standpoint only, of course, is held, which ought to be made known. But before entirely new and rather startling theories are presented to the reader, they must be prefaced by a few words of explanation. This is absolutely necessary, as these theories clash not only with modern science, but contradict, on certain points, earlier statements made by other theosophists, who claim to base their explanations and renderings of these teachings on the same authority as we do. Note. See Esoteric Buddhism and Man. End of note. This may give rise to the idea that there is a decided contradiction between the expounders of the same doctrine, whereas the difference in reality arises from the incompleteness of the information given to earlier writers, who thus drew some erroneous conclusions and indulge in premature speculations in their endeavor to present a complete system to the public. Thus the reader, who is already a student of theosophy, must not be surprised to find in these pages the ratification of certain statements made in various theosophical works, and also the explanation of certain points which have remained obscure, because they were necessarily left incomplete. Many are the questions upon which even the author of Esoteric Buddhism, the best and most accurate of all such works, has not touched. On the other hand, even he has introduced several mistaken notions which must now be presented in their true mystic light, as far as the present writer is capable of doing so. Let us then make a short break between the slokas just explained and those which follow, for the cosmic periods which separate them are of immense duration. This will afford us ample time to take a bird's-eye view of some points pertaining to the secret doctrine, which have been presented to the public under a more or less uncertain and sometimes mistaken light. Before we continue with stanza 6, then, is next up a few early theosophical misconceptions concerning planets, rounds, and man.